Welcome to the virtual door knocking in 2020 podcast. Today with my guest, Susan Harrow, we will be discussing the power of the podcast and how it applies to our present situation with campaigning and running for public office. Before we get started though, let me introduce Susan Harrow. Welcome. Thank you for being our guest.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Roger. So happy to be here with you.
And please tell the audience a little bit about you and your expertise.
So I'm a media coach and marketing strategist and author of Sell Yourself Without Selling Your Soul, published by HarperCollins. And really what media coaching is all about is mastering yourself. It's not about trying to change someone else, but it's about mastering your emotions, your facial expressions, your body language, your verbal expression. So everything that you do, say, are, and think is in complete alignment with who you are and what you want to offer. And also it's really important to have the feel of you. So with all of those things in place, including your words to your website, whatever it is that you want to convey, then draws in the kind of audience or support or whatever it is that you want for yourself is automatically, almost automatically moving toward you when all of those things are in place. Yeah, so should I say more about that?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, so really we go through a role play process. I mean, first we find out what your deepest intentions are. How do you want to serve? So what's your big vision for the world? So that can be also in your community. It doesn't have to be the world. Sometimes it starts with family, community, but then we broaden that out to the world. So what's your deepest intention? How do you want to serve is number one. Number two is what do you want for yourself? And that's physically, financially, emotionally, spiritually, personally, professionally. Because when you start using podcasting or any kind of medium where you are reaching hundreds, thousands of millions of people, you have the opportunity to connect with people on a very deep level and start to draw those people into you. So it's super important to start to think about the future of what you want to draw, whether it's growing your business or winning a political office, whatever that is. What is it that you want, and who can you connect with to drive that to you? And then the third thing is, what do I want my audience to do? So if we're speaking specifically about being in political office, it's like, who do you want to support your campaign? How do you want them to vote? Do you want them to go to your website? Do you want them to give money? Whatever that is, that call to action needs to be super clear. And it can be all of those things in different, sprinkled throughout a conversation and woven seamlessly into a conversation. And that's what we work on. We work on using those deepest intentions, what you want to convey, putting them naturally into a kind of conversation that in between storytelling and statistics and facts and vignettes and the things that actually are of interest to an audience, and that gives you what you want and gives the audience what they want. So it's both of those things matched together.
And those words are why you are my guest today. That was very well said.
Thank you.
So today we are talking about campaigning in 2020. And with all the restrictions that we have because of the COVID-19, there's no more shaking hands, door knocking, or kissing babies. And so we are going to have to now, if you're running for office, you're going to have to do it virtually for the most part. And so we are promoting the idea of using a podcast. So with that in mind, what tips can you give these candidates that's going to help them really connect with the audience by using a podcast?
Yeah, and are we considering video podcast too?
Yes.
So, video is a very different skill than just a voice podcast, because with video, you're managing some of the technical aspects of it is too, not just your voice. What I want to focus on though is really your leadership. 100% of the time, so there's like an energetic circle. So that means right now I'm looking at the little dot. I'm not looking at Roger, so it looks like I'm looking at you. So it's looking at that little dot, which is kind of odd, but it's a way of training yourself 100% of the time. So you start to develop a deep connection with your audience. Statistics show that more powerful people blink less. And I know that you've probably seen, like there was a great scene like in Mobster or, in some of the more terrorizing kinds of shows that, two people have a standoff with their eyes. That's like the extreme of power. What we're looking for, and whoever blinks first or breaks the stare is the one who loses. So what we're looking for is to keep that connection with the audience, but with soft eyes, with an expression of openness that we're receptive to the audience. So that's number one for our facial expression. We want to smile. There are statistics that show in terms of TED Talks that people who smile more are considered more intelligent. But also, I love the idea of this friendliness. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, a spiritual master, I guess I should call him Thich Nhat Hanh, practices what he calls smile yoga, meaning even if you're a meditator, even when you're meditating for 5 minutes or seeing someone, you smile and it starts to change your neuroscience of your brain to be more receptive and to connect with others just by that sign. We naturally do this as people, but sometimes when we're nervous, we forget. And what happens when we forget and we're nervous is we might frown or we might become more serious. So it's to maintain that relaxation so we can smile when it's appropriate. And that's really important too, is appropriate expressions for what you're saying. So for example, when there's bad news, we're not going to be smiling. Like when we're talking about dire circumstances, right now it's COVID, right? We're not going to be smiling about that when we're talking about how many people are dying. When we're talking about restaurants opening and things being back to normal, we would begin to smile. And that, again, most of this happens naturally, but not always when we get nervous. So that's more about connecting with the audience visually, using expression with your hands to show and express things that you want to talk about. If you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, using the expression of your body on camera so you can lean into people when you're talking to them more. You can be expansive, so you can sit back. You do want to sit back in your chair with your butt against the chair and sit up straight and imagine that there's a, like I like to think of like a bolt of light going all the way down to here, through my body, through the bottom of the earth, connecting me to the earth, to all people. Part of that's an imaginative process, but what I find with leaders is that really a lot of the work is behind the scenes in kind of practices that are built up over time. And then that shows up on screen. So there's the practical, technical things that we work on together on how to manage yourself and manage yourself on camera. And then there's the practices that I know, Roger, really well because you're an extremely good tennis player, that there's the mental practice of tennis and then there's the physical practice of tennis. And they're really one and the same. Like how many times did you imagine your serve going in to a certain angle like Roger Federer, and then you practice that. You get your mental and muscle memory in sync. So you're practicing it first with your mind, and then you're practicing it with your body. So those things come together. And this is the same kind of thing. So I can say so much more about that. I thought I should give you a little break for asking a question.
No, this is great advice. And so what about a candidate who has like my facial expression? I have a natural frown. What kind of coaching can you give someone? Because you said, they should stay more, smiling more. It's going to make them feel more at ease, but it's also going to show more, knowledge. So what can you do with someone like me that has a natural frown when I'm just sitting here listening to you?
Yeah. So you can think about your visually that your mouth is actually going up. Maybe physically it's going down, but see, it's already happening.
Yeah.
So if you start to actually imagine, I'm lifting my face up, my face is open like a buttercup, your expression will naturally change. So even as you listen to me, you can think about smiling and sending me good feelings. So if you
Okay.
start to think of me, and if you can't think about sending good feelings to me because you don't know me that well, you think about someone or something that you love. Like some people start with their pets because they're easier to love than people. And then they might think about children, right? So you might go from pets to children to people. But if you start to think of things or people, I remember I was media training a president of a CEO of a very large magazine. And when I asked him, he was talking about one of his daughters that he was particularly proud of. He had two daughters, and one he was particularly proud of. And I said, when I'm answering the question, I want you to think that you're talking to your daughter. She's sitting right across from you. You're talking to your daughter, and have that connection you did. And his whole demeanor changed. And his marketing director was there, and she goes, "Oh my God, you are so handsome. I just love you." So when you have that kind of love expression in your face, it doesn't have to be like a big giant smile. It's felt by others, by how you're expressing yourself outwardly, and in your mind and your physicality automatically follows. So when you start to just have those warm feelings, people feel them. It doesn't mean your mouth might even go up a fraction, but people will not see you as frowning.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. And it leads into this next question because this is probably the most important question here. Communicating virtually will never replace live and face-to-face. So what can a candidate do to make their virtual messaging feel more real?
Yeah. So I think if we're talking about podcasting in particular, it is if you're not doing a video and you're just doing your voice quality, pacing, pitch, rhythm, melody, your staccato, legato, all of that is super important, particularly tone. So if we say something, tone, I think, is the very most important thing. And we see that especially like in a debate or something like that when people get snippy or get pushed to their edges, right? It's about maintaining that equanimity even when you're pushed to the edge. And that because people perceive that as you not being powerful or not being able to control yourself as well as they would hope. So it leads to liking you less, right? Versus people who can maintain that equanimity in any kind of storm. So with your podcasting, it is your voice and it is your tone and it's the way you pause. I just read something about, the drama, how you tell a story. And that's one of the most important things. And I want to say this about podcasts. It doesn't matter what medium this is, but you want to have your signature story ready. And that is your story of origin. Why you do what you do. How did you come to this place in your life? So we've heard a lot of stories and most of them are like rags to riches. Oh, I came from this poor family, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the only kind of story there is. The story is what is meaningful to you. So it can be a story of origin can be anything from ancestral, like, oh, this happened through my family through ages. This is why I'm doing what I do. It can be one generation back. It can be your childhood things that attracted you, like, why you became an artist or why you became a politician, whatever that is. That's one type of story of origin. Another one is an aha moment. Like, did something happen to you that really shifted your whole way of thinking and your whole way of being? And then the third one is really like a lightning bolt moment, something that happened. It doesn't necessarily have to be a trauma, but something like what happened to like Christopher Reeve, who became paralyzed, and then he became an advocate for paralyzed people, and and also an inspiration to all of us. Like, wow, you can do so much when you're paralyzed, and he never believed that he wouldn't overcome it, right? And that's very inspiring. So that was a moment in time that shifted everything for you. So those are stories of origins, but it's so important to tell the story of you and how it relates to me, like how your story connects up with me? Like, why would I care about your story? What is it meaningful to me? And in any kind of a story, you can wrap it up at the end by telling what it's meaning, how it is meaningful to you. And you can actually say that even directly. You can talk directly to your audience and saying, because if it were a poor story, right? Like I didn't have shoes when I was growing up kind of story. If you use that, you could say, I want to make sure that everyone in America has a pair of shoes, right? Or everyone has an education, or whatever that is. Like if you are an advocate of, free college, like, did somebody put you through, like my dad went to Cornell and he was an orphan and someone put him through college. And so he has now put a number of people through another students through Cornell as well. And some of those students, like one student called up my parents, and said, I want to fly out and meet you, and came out and met my parents, right? So if that's like your issue, you would want to have a story like that. And, so as was done for my father, he carried that on to the future, right? And then you broaden it to, and I want everyone's child to have an education. And that's what I'm going to do for you in this election, right?
Oh, what great advice. So I want to thank you for being part of this podcast. And if a candidate who hears this podcast wants to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
They can just jump over to prsecrets.com. P like Paul, R like Richard's, like public relations, PRSECRETS like Sam.com. And I would love meeting you.
Perfect. That'd be great. Thank you very much for your time. So that was good.
Did we, but weren't we going to go over the 5 Ps?
No, we are. Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I've still got that question, but I wanted to use that for the marketing part. So now Can we keep going now?
Absolutely.
All right. That was great, Susan. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.
That was exactly what we were looking for.
It is? Okay, good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And if there's anything you want me to change or add, or you think of, you just let me know and I'll just run with it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I'm going to start the new one.
You want me to give you a countdown?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so now welcome back to the Virtual Door Knocking in 2020 podcast. And with our guest, Susan Harrow, she has mentioned in the past regarding really some critical issues on how to communicate better in front of the camera. And she calls them the 5 Ps. So Susan, would you please tell the audience again what the 5 Ps are?
Yes, and I'm going to peek at my notes.
There you go. You can peek at those. So maybe there's 6 Ps.
I think there's 5. Did we do 5? Yeah, we did 5. So the 5 Ps, we call it the 5 Ps to win a position or an election and make change. So number 1 is presence. Number 2 is personality. Number 3 is perspective. Number 4 is preparation. And number 5 is precision. So presence is really the most important thing. It's often underrated, but it's what we see about you first. Camus said it's the sum of all your experience and who you are. So we see that instantly now in what's called split. It's called thin slicing, and we get you in a quarter of a second. Okay, so a quarter of a second, we have already summed you up, whether we like, trust, believe, and will buy from you. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you've lost your chance in that quarter of a second, but someone has already judged you. So then the movement then toward is to either support or not support that first initial judgment. I love the quote from Jean Cocteau, who said, "Be yourself, the world worships an original." Now, that being said, so many people, it's so hard to be yourself. I hear from all of my clients and my students and my course participants that they think they should be like someone else. But what we really want is truth tellers, and that we want that to be you. We want to see your you as you. So it's really your presence. And then personality follows that. That's like really where do you shine? How are you different? And what are your quirks? And I really think about, how you're an original, but like sometimes people really want to iron out those quirks and some of those things, whether it's a way of speaking or a way of being. Like one of my clients always paused in sort of an odd place. But what that made me do was lean forward to listen, because I was always like, well, what? So it sort of disrupted the rhythm of my thinking. So whatever that is for you, it's really about, we're taking in the gestalt of you, where we talked about the facial expression, the verbal expression, the body expression. We're taking in all of that, and then we're taking in like what you do, your quirks and your natural way of being. And in podcasting, we talked about vocal variety, which is the pitch, pacing, rhythm, volume, melody, and that's one of the things that we're looking for too. One of these examples was the Mr. Rogers, who was on the Tonight Show with Joan Rivers, and he turned to her and he spontaneously burst into song, and looking into her eyes the whole entire time, he said, it's you I like, it's not the things you wear. It's not the way you do your hair, but it's you I like, the way you are right now. The way down deep inside you, not the things that hide you, not your jokes, they're just beside you, but it's you I like, every part of you. And that's what we like too. And I love that he said that, because, you know, Mr. Rogers, you can't fool children, right? And Mr. Rogers knew that. And he is that kind of childlike innocence that he had. I think that's what we seek in people too. Like, we want to see your innocence and your freshness and your perspective. We don't want to hear the same thing over and over again. I mean, one of the things that, of course, when I train my clients, we talk about sound bites and we talk about your key messages, but I'll be darned if I want you to repeat those exact same things exactly the same way in every medium. No, because if you do it in one medium, if you do it in podcasting, I do not want to hear you doing that on somebody else's podcast. I want you to tell maybe that same story in 10 different ways so we hear it fresh. You know, and that's super important, to be knowing that you are a spontaneous and true person. Because if the second we think that you're rehearsed, we then lose confidence and we lose trust. And that's kind of that's kind of tricky, right? Because we want to get our message out there, but we want that message to be fresh each time, you know,
Yes.
and say it like it's the first time. So, and I think it's about your intention being pure too. Like, if you really are out there wanting to connect and believing sincerely in yourself, but believing sincerely in how you're going to help and serve others. I think that comes across, that right action comes across really quickly. Number 3 is perspective. That's how you see the world now and how you envision the future. So how are you going to take us there as a politician in office? We're here. You want to take us there. What's the journey that you're going to take us in between? How are you going to move us with you toward that change? And how are you going to make the world a better place for all of us? Preparation is 4. That's practicing your points. That's the delivery. That's the full embodiment and the expression of your message. And that is, again, it's got to be an embodied message. You need to believe it at your core, right? And then to be able to deliver it. Precision is number 5, which is getting clear on your message and how to deliver it to different audiences and mediums for maximum effect. We talked about a little bit about the visual medium of video and podcasting, you know, those 2 different mediums, because we can't meet people in person. So podcasting and radio are the same, and then like TV and video are very similar, right? You know, and those kinds of ways of connecting with the audience. And on TV and on when you're sitting with someone in studio, or even like now satellite, you're not actually in studio, but you want to set up that connection with the audience, with the host, because once that connection is set up, the audience feels that connection. So when you're connecting, like not Jimmy Kimmel, what's the other Jim? Jimmy Fallon. He's brilliant at that kind of thing. Like, he's got, you know, the audience in his pocket. He's got the person who his guest is in the pocket, because they're both like laughing together. So the connection is set up. So we feel that and we love them both. Right. So you want to set up that love connection, because that's the most important thing. Numbers, so precision, we talked about. Also, that's number 6? Wait, we did 5. That was
Yep.
5. So I
Yep.
finished.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's 5.
No, and this was great advice. And if anything else, I would think that most politicians need coaching on all 5 of those points. Those are very, very good. Thank you. And I'm
I
going
think
to
it's really, can I just say one thing? What
absolutely.
happens is role play is super important. And you've seen this on some of the popular TV shows with political candidates, like, when they're running through role play before they have like a press meeting and they get asked the hard questions. It's just like when you're on the witness stand. It is the same thing as a politician. You want to imagine that you're on the witness stand and that you're being grilled.
Right.
And to actually do that role play, because you want the feel of it. You want the hardest questions with the most aggressive energy, and you want the kind of questions. So what we do is we run through the hardest questions. We also run through the kind of questions that are most intimidating or most difficult. So then you can answer those with ease and still stay on point without a change of expression or a shift in your body posture, which is natural. Like, even if you do shift, you want to get back to center immediately. So you might be, pummeled by a question. You might actually, that's right. And then you've got to come back to center before you answer the question. So that all takes an enormous amount of practice to get used to it. So I just want to say, like, all of these things that I'm talking about, it's not like, just your very first interview, expect yourself to be perfect, or your very first podcast. Your first ones are probably going to be somewhat crappy, unless you've practiced a lot behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And then you want to start to really just keep micro movementing toward improvement.
Oh, great advice. Very, very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time.